Thank you, Marta. Buenos dias. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. My name is Nayamin, and it's a pleasure for me to be sharing with you this session about prejudice, and the story of environmental injustices in Fresno. I pretty much have probably chosen any community in the Central Valley for that matter, because CCGN works in various communities from Madera County down to Kern County. But I chose Fresno because that's probably where I have worked more closely in the past few years. So I want this to be an interactive session. I don't want me speaking to you and just telling, oh, this is what I've seen and this is what I do. I want to get to know you too. And because of that, we don't have time to go around and all share our names and affiliations. But if you can put in the chat your name, the organization that you work at right now, or the organization that you are representing, please do so I can also, while I do my personal introduction, I can then go over the chat and see who is in the room. And, are we lucky to have people from outside of California or other parts of California? So if you don't mind, please put your name and your affiliation or the organization you're representing. And when you guys do that, I'm going to start with my own introduction. And I think that the topic that we are discussing today really calls for us to be more inclusive in our introductions. Yes, I am the executive director of the Central California Environmental Justice Network, which is a mouthful, so most people refer to us as CCJN. But I am many other things beyond that. And I think that since the main topic of this discussion that we're having today is prejudice and how that informs the environmental injustices in communities, I think we need to understand that our own perceptions, our own feelings of others, based on all the isms, based on the races or the race, based on the gender, based on all kinds of affiliations, are really going to inform our views and the way that we do our work. So because of that, I decided to share a little bit more about me with you beyond my title. So I'll start from the general and going more into the personal. So my formal education, it's very eclectic, if you you allow me to use that term. I have a master's in public health, but also in sociology. And although the combination might sound weird to you, it has become very, very helpful for me to navigate these waters of how to help our communities fight these environmental injustices, because I am able to understand public health perspectives, but I'm also able to understand why groups of people behave in the way they do. And for that, it includes industry, it includes regulators, it includes community members, and everybody in between. So I've been working on promoting environmental justice and social justice in general for 21 years. And I have done that primarily with immigrants here in the Central Valley. Because as you might have already perceived from my accent, I am not a native from California. I was born in Mexico City. But I moved to California 21 years ago. So I have called Fresno my home for that long. And in these places where I formed my family, I am blessed to have two wonderful kids, Jesus, who is 18, and Anna, who is 15. And that basically, like for many of you, they are my motor. They are my motivation of what I do and the reason that I want to improve our communities. And you will see that in a short video that I will share with you in a minute. And beyond all my, what I do as part of my, day job, I also have other interests, right? So I'm a runner, and that also informs my interest in help in air pollution. I love to do theater, so it has been a common tool that CCJN has used to educate communities. So for instance, we have done little skits on social and environmental problems. And I love to prepare good food. I'm a foodie. So, if you have attended some of our meetings, like our conference that we had in January of 2020, I was really putting a lot of attention that everybody were well fed and good food that was made by local people with local ingredients and with a lot of love. So that's pretty much a full picture of who Nayamin is. And why I'm sharing all these details. Maybe you'll be like, I don't care who you are. Well, who I am really informs where I'm working now and why I'm working in this. So the next thing that I want you to start thinking, the main question that I want to start thinking, because I'm going to ask you to again put it in the chat, but maybe also some of you are going to be volunteering to share some of your responses. You know, you can raise your hand and you are going to be unmuted and you're going to be able to share it. So, but before I do that, I will share with you this short video that I was able to create with the support of the Storytelling Center, which I hope explains to you how I became more engaged in fighting air pollution in Fresno and in engaging youth. So without further ado, you know, it's not a piece of art, so don't expect, you know, like a Oscar-winning film. It's just a short video. So, but I hope you enjoy it. Can you hear the video, the sound?
Yes, we can.
I can't wait to grow up and move out of Fresno to a place where I can breathe.
I mean, we aren't seeing the screen. You need to reset the screen share real quick.
Okay, you see, technology, like I would always say, could be your best ally or your worst enemy. So my apologies, I'll try it one more time. And let me just restart it. Can you see it? Can you see it now?
Yes. And audio, great.
I can't wait to grow up and move out of Fresno to a place where I can breathe. My 8-year-old son said as we were driving back from visiting family in San Jose. As a mother, I was sad. I also felt angry and hopeless. Many people here have severe respiratory issues, but that didn't mean much to me until my son was diagnosed with asthma at the age of 2. Don't forget to take your asthma medication, we're constantly saying. When I moved to Fresno 20 years ago from Mexico City, I didn't know I was moving from the city with the worst air quality in the world to the basin with the worst air quality in the United States. My son wasn't the only kid who wanted to leave the Central Valley to escape the air pollution. For years, I heard the same thing from other youth. The environmental justice movement in the Central Valley has been strong, but youth have not really been involved. I had not thought about it until I was at the Capitol in Sacramento. There were a dozen youth activists demanding that Governor Brown stop allowing oil extraction in California. All but one were white. Where are our kids? I thought. I saw only one Latino youth representing CCJN and Kern County, where 85% of the oil extraction in California takes place. That's when I knew we needed to start educating and nurturing the youth from our community to get involved in the EJ movement. Last year, CCJN launched its YES Youth Environmentally Savvy program in partnership with sister organizations across the Central Valley. In our first year, a group of middle school youth in Avenal learned about environmental justice, traveled to Sacramento to talk to legislators, and have been active in local efforts to shut down the landfill that is poisoning Avenal. Now they're producing the first EJ Bingo to help other youth and children learn about environmental justice, something that is not taught in schools. When I see youth becoming engaged advocates and drivers of change, I feel hopeful. If given the right tools and information, youth don't have to escape the Central Valley. They can stay and transform it.
So I hope this was a good subway to what I would like us to discuss. The audio stopped. It stopped for me too?
No, we were able to hear at the end.
Okay. Well, I was just saying that I hope that this video allowed you to respond from my perspective the question that I asked. So I wanted to show you how my personal story, my personal interest had informed the work that I'm doing with CCJN, and that I am not going to probably be seeing the benefits of it, probably, hopefully my grandchildren. I don't know. But at this moment, before I continue with the PowerPoint, I would like to ask some of you to share, if you would like to unmute yourself, share verbally what your name is, your affiliation, and most importantly, what do you do in that work, and how your personal history, how your background motivated you or informed the place where you're working now and the work that you're doing. So if you would like to volunteer, please raise your hand so that our tech support can unmute you.
Do you see anybody, Ryan, raising their hand?
I don't currently.
Come on, guys, don't be shy. If no one unmutes, I'm gonna call a name, like in school, remember?
We have M. Cottrell.
Yeah, hi, I'm Maxine, and the reason I'm doing what I'm doing for the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, doing waste discharge permitting, is because I used to work in the chemical industry, and I'm very aware of some of the stuff that goes on, and I wanted to be able to be more on a front line interacting with the regulatory aspect. So that's why I'm doing what I do. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Great.
I see Gustavo also.
Hi, could you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
Oh, great. Good to be here with all of you. My name is Gustavo. I work for Caltrans. And, my area of work really focuses on, proving active transportation for communities. And, I grew up in the Los Angeles area, and I've always thought to myself, why do some communities have really great infrastructure and others don't? And especially those of disadvantaged communities. So I've really taken it upon myself to really just work really closely with all communities, but especially those that don't have resources. And I started to do a lot more research and then really read into local plans and to see that there are statistics that show that, communities of color are despairingly being affected by, pollution and also by accidents, especially children, that walk and bike to school, and even parents. And one of the things that really frustrated me was that even in my region, there was a big focus on doing improvements in areas predominantly where they had really good infrastructure. And I really had to speak up and be, in my view, very courageous and bold, and to speak to executive management to say, this is unacceptable. When statistics and facts bear out that show that, that certain communities are suffering, and yet we're investing in other communities, that's not right. And so one of the things that, I would say to all of you and to myself is, whatever work you do, you know, it's great that we talk about it, but we have to be bold. We have to deliver, you know, on whatever we're doing. And I am constantly fighting, even with my own colleagues, because they're not, you know, taking the next step, right? They're having these discussions, but they're not challenging the system and really working with communities and doing the engagement that needs to happen, and looking at the data and analysis. Like, I'm sure as I'm sorry to get your name, the host, but I know that you are looking at real statistical data. That data doesn't mean anything unless you put it out in the world, and you put it in those who have power, put it in their face and say, is it acceptable for children to be hit by cars? You know, and is it acceptable that parents, you know, have to fear for going to work and school? It's completely unacceptable. And so I just really encourage all of you to, you know, to be bold in whatever you do, and not be afraid, because when you're doing the right thing, you know, even if you're not a very good public speaker, I mean, I have terrible anxiety public speaking, but if you're passionate about what you're doing, and if it's for the right thing, there's never any reason to doubt yourself. So that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
No, thank you, Gustavo. And you cannot tell that you have anxiety to speak publicly. You just did a wonderful job. So thank you for sharing. And I'm glad to have Caltrans here, because honestly, that's one of the agencies that I have had more problems reaching to. And, you know, I know it's a big agency, but definitely thank you. It's always good to be a champion in whatever agency you are working. It could be water, it could be air, it could be whatever, but we can all make a difference. We're going to take 2 more comments and we're going to move on so that we can cover all the materials.
I had Annie Evans in the chat here. I'm going to ask to unmute, and then Dave Garan.
Hi, folks. Sorry, I can't put my camera on because we've been having storms and power outages, so I don't want to lose connection and miss the rest of the webinar. I work at University of Richmond in a project called New American History.
We may have lost you, Annie. I'm going to jump over to Dave, but leave you unmuted. Dave, go ahead.
I can turn off my camera too. Go ahead, Annie.
Oh, sorry. Can y'all hear me okay?
Good.
Yes,
you're back.
Great. Okay, so anyway, so we have these series of maps related to redlining that show long-lasting health effects and then impacts of climate change and various environmental factors. So my role and the project New American History, we produce K-12 resources. So we're not currently teaching this in our schools, but we all need to be. So I develop learning resources that are on our website. They're free of charge. There's no paywall. There's no login. We're trying to push these out to as many schools in as many states as possible. And so that's my interest in tuning in today and trying to advocate for this to become part of the school curriculum K-12 in every state. Thank you.
thank you. Dave.
For the session.
Hi. Those announcements are annoying. I'm sorry, but I wanted to just say I turned off my camera because sometimes my internet's unstable. So I'm from Akron, Ohio. Actually, I'm a chemist by training. I work as a water treatment operator for a municipality here in Ohio, Northeast Ohio, and I was just curious how things are in California compared to Ohio. So thanks for having me.
Welcome all the way from Ohio. I was in Cleveland a couple of years ago when they did the river and water. It was a conference, a water conference. So I enjoy visiting your home state. So welcome. We might not have time for more comments, but I will be encouraging you to please add any other comments that you have in the chat. We're going to be recording the chat and probably sharing it back with all the participants, so you can see that the breadth of experiences that you all bring to the table. So I'm really happy to hear your testimonies and the work that you are doing, how you're going above and beyond what your job description does. I think that having champions like you in every agency and organization at the national and local level is what can make a difference in the historical environmental injustices that we have seen. And Dave, I hope that you can take a more understanding from my presentation. What I'll be sharing is focused on one city, but as I said, it's just one illustration of the many similar stories that happen not only in the Central Valley, which is the central part of California, but across the state, and I'm sure in other communities across the United States. So with that, I'm going to continue sharing my PowerPoint so we can move on. And okay, so thank you all for sharing your thoughts. Before I move on to the injustices that are here prevalent still in Fresno, I would like to take a moment to say that, yes, we have these injustices, but it is just fair to recognize that there has been efforts to change these dynamics for years. And one of these efforts are from the Central California Environmental Justice Network. We were formed in 2000, so we have been in existence for 21 years. And as you can see here in the screen, we have a very humble vision, right? We just want to end environmental racism. So, I think, unfortunately, we're not going to be out of work for many, many years. We wish, really, but, the reality is that we're not there yet. But we really hope that through oral programs and working in partnerships with many others, including agencies that are governmental, other nonprofits, schools, universities, we can all really end up eliminating these environmental negative impacts, because they're not affecting everybody equally. They're affecting more low-income communities of color. And I'm sure it's not only in Fresno, but across the country. So, as I said, I'm going to focus on Fresno. And this is a quote from one of my favorite researchers. He works at the University of Davis, a esteemed colleague and friend, Jonathan London. He wrote a paper, it's called Land of Risk, a Land of Opportunity. And it's a great document that I encourage you to look for, because it really paints a story of how our region, it's so important. We're the main agricultural part of the world in terms of all the wealth of produce that we generate every year. However, and we have other industries, but all of these come at a cost of all the toxic byproducts of this economic activity that we have in our region. And, I just mentioned agriculture because it's probably one of the reasons why we are known internationally, but that's not the only main economic driver of our region. Kern County, which is in the southern part of our state, is the place where 85% of the oil extraction in California happens. We have one of the largest dairies in the state. Tulare County, just south of Fresno, has more cows than people, to give you some statistics. And then we have the two largest hazardous waste disposal facilities in the entire Western United States. And those are located in two communities of color, Kettleman City and Bottom Willow. We have some of the most active biomass facilities in the state. We have highways, and most importantly, in the last decade, we have been attracting these large warehouses left and right. This is a map that some of you, obviously, if you work for CaliPA, any of the videos at CaliPA, you're very familiar with this map. For our colleagues outside of California, this is a great tool that I encourage you to check out, and hopefully you can encourage your state to replicate something like this. This is called Kalimbara Screen. And what it does, it collects all the information from different agencies and also from the census, so that it creates this ranking. At the top, you can see on the right-hand side, the ranking. So 91 to 100 are the communities that are more burdened by pollution and have the highest social vulnerability. As you can see, the central part of the map, that's the Central Valley, we have the top disadvantaged communities in the state. And as I said before, we're not equally impacted. When you narrow down more who is living in those orange or red communities, this is the people. This is the picture that you will see. You will see Asians. We have a large presence of Southeast Asians in Fresno. You will see African Americans and of course Latinos. So these are the faces of the people that are more affected by these environmental injustices. And that's why we call this forms of environmental racism. Now, still using Kalimbara Screen, but narrowing it down to the city of Fresno. This is what you see in the map. And, as I said, this might be slightly different. Kevin Old mentioned at the beginning of the introduction that the story of Stockton. In Stockton, it was east and west. In Fresno, it's north and south. So there has always been the tale of two cities. The north being, as you see, green, northeast, green, yellowish, the south being orange and red. And I'll give you some concrete examples. One of the beauties of Kalimbara Screen is that you can even get data at a census tract level. You can even put your address, for goodness sake, and it will tell you in which level of it ranks. And you can get that for a variety of indicators. So I just chose here some of the ones that I think are more relevant for our discussion today. So what I did is I used the addresses of two high schools, one located in North Fresno and one located in South Fresno. And these are the rankings. As you could see, ozone and PM, it's similar, 98 and 97 percentile. But the story is quite different when you go to diesel, asthma, and poverty. So the diesel burden of pollution in the south part is almost double the one in the south. The asthma rates are triple, and poverty is significantly different. And when we want to narrow down again, like who is more affected, I used the data from that Kalimbara Screen, and I also make these charts that tell you the race and ethnicity. So while people in the north are predominantly white, more than 64%, in the south is the opposite. You have 58% being Hispanics. You have also a significant presence of African Americans and Asian Americans. And you might be wondering, why? Why do we have more diesel pollution in the south? Well, I'll paint a picture. So this is a snapshot of one of the southern parts of the city of Fresno that is neighboring with the unincorporated community of Malaga. Remember that I mentioned biomass as a source of pollution? Well, that arrow right there shows one of the biomass incinerator that is called Rio Bravo. Next to it is a glass factory. And this is just half a mile from an elementary school where 98% of the kids are Latinos. So if you're not, a lot of you mentioned that you work on water and all that, so maybe this data might be helpful. Biomass might not mean a lot to you, but just to give you a sense, this particular biomass facility, Rio Bravo, it's one of the largest sources of pollution of PM 2.5 in Fresno. And the second source is the glass factory that is located next to it. But if that was not enough, that same community, this is a visual or an aerial vision of that same area. All those red dots are distribution centers that have been permitted in the last 2 decades. The school, Malaga Elementary, was established in 1930. The biomass facility was permitted in 1980 or in the 80s, and the glass factory shortly after. And these distribution centers in the last 20 years. So the school was first. And on top of that, you can see that the parks and the schools are the minority. I also want to just take a brief pause here to mention that we are constantly thinking of data, and oftentimes we don't even think, for instance, tree canopy as a example of inequity. But there was a recent study that was published just in June of 2021 that created the tree equity score. So you can actually go and seek almost any urban area in the United States and see what is the equity score that you have. So that just, I found it, and it was a super helpful tool, because it allows us to see that all these communities, on top of this, they do not have access to the same number of trees that the northern part of Fresno. But I don't want to be negative. You know, there's some hope in the horizon. So in 2017, the state legislature approved that AB 617, Assembly Bill 617, which created the Community Area Protection Program. I saw some similar names, Brian and others working in CARB that actually are working in this program. And basically what this program is trying to do is to reverse this trend. So it's trying to focus on communities that are closer to industrial zones, to highways, to distribution centers. And obviously South Central Fresno was selected to be part of this program. And the goal of the program are very bold. You know, we're going to try to first find out what is causing this exacerbated pollution and how we can resolve it by engaging residents. I am part of, along with other 20, 30 people, of a steering committee that is creating emission reduction plans to resolve this issue. Are we closer? Have we done any improvement? Are we already, you know, our air pollution problem and our injustices are resolved with AB 617? Well, obviously not. Why? I'll explain several reasons. The first one is that, yes, it's true that we have AB 617 and that we have been working for close to 3 years to design strategies to undo this air pollution in South Fresno. But while we are doing that, the city of Fresno continues to permitting large warehouses and distribution centers as a main source of developing jobs. So I feel like if we're sweeping the house and they are turning around and littering all over again, that's unfortunately the way I feel. And then on top of that, the city of Fresno is about to approve, actually today, a program environmental impact report to review future projects in South Central Fresno without proper analysis of impacts, not only from present or future projects, but also from the past. In this image, I put pictures of the Amazon warehouse, which is just close, like, you know, next to the Ulta warehouses. These two were permitted in late 2018. They opened for operations in 2019. So now what we're being told is that, there's going to be more warehouses as big as this or even more. And that when they are going to determine the impact of these warehouses, they're not going to even find out what these two places are polluting, how much, you know, diesel exposure these sources are generating, and before they say it's okay to create another big warehouse next to it. So as I said before, I feel that we are trying to clean the air and the city is just turning around and creating more pollution. And I wanted to say that this is not new and that this is not easy to undo these things, because these are not just in our recent history. This is part of the history of racism that has prevailed in Fresno historically. The south part of Fresno, Edison High, the place that I look to use, the address that I used to look for the Kalimbara Screen data. I mean, what you see there, they don't have trees, they don't have grocery stores, they don't have hospitals, they don't have parks, they don't have none of that. And there's a great article that this PowerPoint will be available to you later. So this is a great article that really tells a lot of testimonies of people living in these communities, such as Alina Cotton, who I promise it was just by coincidence that she ended up being a fellow that has worked with us right now during the summer to assess the lack of trees in South Fresno. But basically, as I was saying, this is historical, you know, even, and this dates back to the 1800s, where at that time, redlining policies determined that if you were Chinese, if you were Japanese, or Armenian, or Mexican, whatever the wave of immigrant was prevalent in that era, you only can live in the west side on the other side of the tracks. That's where they wanted the meatpacking houses. That's where they allowed the slaughterhouses. That's where they allowed all the things that white people, rich people didn't want in their neighborhoods. And that has happened since 1800. So what we're trying to undo through the AB 617, it's not going to be easy to be done because this being in place for hundreds of years. So let's fast forward to 2021. Unfortunately, prejudice and environmental racism is still prevalent in our communities in various ways. I mean, it's true that we don't have any in writing redlining, rules that say that if you are white or if you are, Mexican American or if you are African American, you cannot buy a house in any part of the city. However, the way that land use practices continue is, for example, allowing the development of huge mansions that cost over $500,000 and above in the northern part of town, shopping centers in the northern part of town, while in the south, it just continues to be zoned for heavy industrial, and even changing the zoning of all neighborhoods in Southwest to now be industrial, in a way displacing a lot of these minorities that have living there for decades. And if you're even if they tell you, oh, well, we're not preventing you to go and buy a mansion in the northern part of Fresno, but if they're just allowing these high-end houses without, for instance, promoting affordable housing in that part of town, what's going to happen? That division by race will continue. One thing that I also want to mention of how this is really a sign of how our personal prejudice are informing how we do our work. And in this case, I'm using the example of elected officials. When myself or other advocates have gone to the Board of Supervisors in Fresno, to the city council meetings, to try to advocate for more equity in the way that they permit things, in the way that they plan how the city is growing, that's when the elected officials get angry and start calling us names, from poverty pimps to job killers. And one of the most recent ones, I got a phone message from an angry person that doesn't like my opinions about the use of pesticides. And he was calling me, I'm a communist bitch, and wishing that I get all the rotten food of the world so that I can feed that to my family. So I don't know about you, but what is that? That's environmental racism. I'm a woman of color in charge of an organization, and I have been singled out by agencies, local government agencies, slandering myself, but also the organization, because we are trying to improve the well-being of these disadvantaged communities, not only in Fresno, but across the Central Valley. So I don't want to end on a negative note. I want to say that I'm optimistic despite all this. And despite I've been called names, and despite I have received threats in my phone, and despite that, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm a human being. That hurts me. That has, created anxiety and insomnia. But again, why I do what I do? You saw in the video, because of my child and because of all the children like him, that they don't need to move outside of the Central Valley just to breathe clean air. We can do it and should have the right to do it here in Fresno, no matter where you live, no matter which side of the city you live. And this image is a picture of one of our programs that many of you are familiar with, but for those of you outside of the state or the Central Valley or California, it is called IVAN Reporting Network. IVAN stands for Identifying Violations Affecting Neighborhoods. And what it is a way for residents that are affected by air pollution or water problems, or all the gamut of environmental problems that a disadvantaged community encounters. And we bring together agencies. We have worked with DPR, we have worked with the ag commissioners, we have worked with CARB, with the air districts, with everybody. Because I already showed you how all these cumulative and historical injustices are prevalent, and that doesn't mean that one of us or our single agencies are going to be able to resolve them. We all need to communicate with each other. We all need to work together, and we all need to let aside our prejudice and let aside what preconceptions we have learned growing up, and think, right now I am in this job for a reason, and hopefully you will be able to take the example of some of you shared early, that you're going beyond, that you're pushing even for changes within your own agencies, that you are trying to make a difference. If we all do a little bit extra in our individual roles and taking advantage of programs like IBAN, I think that we can set aside our differences and try to work together for the common good. So I have spoken for a lot of time, so I'll just open it up for your questions and also your comments. How in your communities, in your own states, how this story that I painted of Fresno is similar or different? And what are you doing to address these environmental injustices? So if you feel like sharing, you can write it in the chat, or you can just raise your hand and we will unmute yourself. And Sabrina.
Sorry, Nayamin, we are instructed that we are to go back to the main session. We're out of time. Sorry about that. Ryan has left some instructions on how to go back to the main site. If you can click on the link, you can go back. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nayamin, for a wonderful presentation. Leave us some comments in the chat or some questions. We will follow up with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sorry for speaking so long and didn't give you a chance to give comments. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan.
You're welcome, Nayamin. Thank you for the presentation. That was great.
Thank you. See you on the other side.
Yep.